first, Willie? Who's first?
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? And I just want to make sure, Tech, you're okay with all right, I think you're streaming or doing some kind of production. Okay. All right. Oh, no pressure. Oh, thank you now. Good afternoon again, everyone. Appreciate you being here. Really appreciate the invitation to come to North Carolina and be a part of this amazing event. Really want to celebrate everything we've heard so far. Willie Barney, and I wanted to share with you, coming from Omaha. A lot of people don't know much about Omaha, so just as some quick background, we are the 39th largest city in the country, 500,000 in the city, 1 million in the metro. And I have lived in the city for 25 years. Someone asked me earlier today, how did you get into this work? I got into this work after 15 years of doing corporate facilitation, strategic planning, cross-functional teams. Moved to Omaha and worked there with the media for a number of years. And what I kept seeing on television was the number of young men that we were losing to gun violence, reading it in the paper, seeing it in the news. And as I was traveling before that, I noticed as city to city, whether it was in Chicago or Miami or LA or wherever I went, I saw some of the same circumstances, especially in the black community. And so after about 4 years of working in Omaha in the corporate sector, in prayer, thinking about how can we do things differently, what can we do, stepped out in faith. And one of the things that pushed me over the edge was seeing on the news 2 young men that were attending a local high school decided that their best option in life was to go rob a pawn shop. And the circumstances are that one of them was shot and killed, the other one was paralyzed for life. And I thought at that time, what do we need to do to prevent this from happening? What more can we do? So that led me to getting in my car in 2006 and going around and talking to other African-American leaders in different sectors. And I'll get deeper into where we've gone from there. But Omaha, again, is 1 million in the metro, 500,000 in the city. The work that we're going to speak to you about is 2 different things, 3 actually: Empowerment Network 360 and our partnership with the Omaha Police Department. So the work that I'm going to show you is 18 years that we've been doing this, 18 years since that initial incident that pushed me over the edge. There's been other things that have occurred since then. We really believe in deep community engagement. I heard in the last panel, those that are most impacted, those that are engaged in various activities, those are the individuals that we spend time really listening and developing strategies and ideas. And everything that we've done up to this point has come from working with people most impacted in the communities. Just now, fast forward, we've been recognized. We've been on CNN together. We've been recognized by the Obama Foundation as one of 4 model communities. We also partner with MBK Alliance. So there's a lot of different things that have occurred over time. But let me take you back to the beginning. In 2006, when I started to go out and talk to people in the community, one of the reasons I did that was we were going to violence at an all-time high. At that time in the city of Omaha, we were averaging around 240, 250 non-fatal shootings, and we were escalating in 1 month where we had in Omaha 35 shootings in one primary neighborhood. So in 2006, rather than waiting for someone to come and bring us together, or the mayor's office or anybody else, we decided, what can we do as a community to develop our own strategy? So we started to host meetings on Saturday mornings. We had this table right here of 7, 8 people was our initial violence prevention group. That's what was the beginning and the formation of Omaha 360, although we didn't know it at that time. Then we had another group that was working on economic development and housing. So what we did again was people in the community, grassroots level, developing strategy around what can we do to build a better, stronger community from the bottom up. That led us to creating what's now a 501c3 called the Empowerment Network. It's a community-based collaborative agency. Our job is to get people in the room, get people to the table so that we can develop and implement strategies together. You can see here the primary areas: reducing unemployment, improving education, improving housing, economic activity, quality of life around health. So we, as an empowerment network, a 501c3, we facilitate tables that then integrate and work together on these strategies together. The one that we're obviously talking about today is how do we reduce gun violence in these communities that have been hard hit by poverty, unemployment, and many other root cause issues. So that led us into having sessions in the community with the young people that were most impacted and most involved in violence. So again, this strategy didn't come from a certain high on the hill. This came from sitting in rooms like this not preaching at the young men, not telling them what they should do, but just simply listening to what is causing this. In summer of 2007, we had 35 shootings in these particular neighborhoods. What happened? What created this? And so we couldn't reach out to them, but we had people in the community that could bring them into the room. And they told us very clearly, I've applied for 10 jobs, 15 jobs. I cannot get any employment. I need to help pay bills at home. Lack of positive activities. In the middle of the summer, there's stuff to do in other parts of the city, but in our part of the city, there's little to nothing to do. So my younger brother and sister, they have absolutely nothing to do. The other thing they told us is that I'm going to school, but right now school is not connecting with my reality whatsoever. And so those were the three things that we took forward and said, we've got to be able to address those issues. Fast forward, we didn't know how to do it exactly, but we knew that we had to create an employment opportunity for the young people in our community. So we started with what we called then the Great Summer Jobs Program, where we went out and we recruited young men, primarily young men, but some young women that were either on the fence and headed in the wrong direction, or they were involved in some type of gang activity, or we had principals that referred the young men and young women to us. We created a job program that has now grown into Step Up Omaha, where every summer we have hired anywhere from 150 to 1 year before the pandemic, we had almost 1,000 from our community that were most impacted, and we created this job program. It's expanded now to where they're doing entrepreneurship, they're doing robotics, they're doing drones, they're doing music production. But one of the first things I would tell you is that if we're going to really address gun violence in our community and address some of these core issues, we have to create economic opportunities for the young people in our community. This program, this initiative has probably had the greatest impact on us reducing gun violence. That's not from me saying it, that's from the chief of police, now from the mayor's office, city council members. They know that this is a huge part of us reducing violence in our community. The other thing that you heard or saw on the screen was not only jobs, but lack of positive activities. So we partnered with the churches. We brought over 100 church communities together, neighborhoods together, and we began to develop what specific things can we do during the summer to create positive alternatives to where they don't have to get involved in violence, they don't have to get involved in negativity because they have jobs and they have other positive things to do. So block parties, as simple as something as block parties in targeted neighborhoods in areas that traditionally have not had those kinds of opportunities during the summer. The other thing is, so we saw a 70% reduction in gun violence during the summer months. Where most cities were seeing increases, we saw a 70% reduction over time with those job opportunities, positive activities, and then we said, well, what else can we do year-round? Working with our community-based agencies, youth development agencies, we then created a Village Basketball Alliance, working with the Hope Center and others, to where year-round there are other alternatives for our young people to get involved in. Very targeted, very focused on these communities. So as I mentioned, the result was, this is our track that we saw as we were creating more job opportunities in the community. And this was the corresponding result of gun violence during the summer months. And the goal was, if we can see that during the summer months in these targeted neighborhoods, what would it require for us to then take that and expand it to year-round? The next phase then was when they told us that education isn't connecting with me. So we went and we started to work with the school district to identify what specific things are happening in this North Omaha neighborhood, what kind of opportunities are available through the school system. And at that time, there was only a 50% graduation rate. So we started working and partnering with the school district, with 40+ agencies and organizations that we convened around the Cradle to Career strategy. And we were able to see the graduation rate go from 50% for African Americans up to 81%. It started to level out right before the pandemic and actually came down during the pandemic, but we've already regained and brought those groups back together around the Cradle to Career strategy so they can move that forward. I went through that very quickly, but I just wanted to give you some background. So we started in the community engagement, listening to those most impacted, those that are having the direct issues in the community, hearing from them, jobs, positive activities, and also addressing education. So as we saw those things began to move, we also said, what else do we need to do to go upstream to reduce gun violence, and how do we partner with the police department to make that happen? I always get the question, well, what did you do to create partnerships with police, between community and police, especially in the Black community, with all the historic issues that we've had and even timely issues that we've had between Black community and the police? How did you do that? We'll talk more about that in the Q&A time period, but wanted to give you just some background on how we started as the Empowerment Network, how we led through with employment, positive activities, educational strategies, and then where that has led us now. Let me maybe pause for just a minute. Any one or two quick questions before we move into this partnership? Yes. So thank you for that. So if you couldn't hear in the back, he asked, how long did we stay in the community before we moved to this next piece? So day one, when I got in my car and began to drive around and talk to individuals and hear from them, pastors, neighborhood leaders, people that were in different positions around the community, the media. We had friends that were in the media. So we went and had some one-on-one conversations. That then turned into groups of 3 and then 7 and 10. And then eventually we hosted a meeting where 70 of us came together. And at that meeting, we were talking earlier, we put the data on the screen. And we just said it like this. Who in this room, what agency, what organization, what church, what businesses is going to address 50% graduation rate by themselves? What agency or organization by themselves is going to reduce this all-time high that we have in gun violence? So we showed the trends. And so we asked the question in the room when we had those 70 leaders, who's willing to commit to stay at the table, even when it gets tough, even when we have to have some hard conversations, will you stay at the table? And I'd say about 70 to 80% of them decided to stay. Some decided that they didn't want to be, it was too much. But that group met for another 9 months of strategy development, meeting with residents, meeting with others in the community to develop this bottom-up strategy. So 9 months, no media. It was just simply strategic conversations amongst ourselves of how are we going to address these issues in our community. Thank you very much for the question. In the back. Yes. So thank you for the question. So the Empowerment Network, again, is a 501c3. It's more of a collaborative, what they would call a collective impact organization now. So we have these different tables that we facilitate, but this specific program, Step Up, we facilitate that ourselves. So we raise the funds, we identify the work sites, we partner then with agencies, Urban League, Hope Center, Boys and Girls Club. They are subcontractors to us through the Empowerment Network Step Up Omaha program. And now the mayor's office and others support that. So we have 100+ work sites, and we have kids from all over the city, but especially in North and South Omaha, where we have historically had higher rates of poverty, unemployment, and gun violence. So the majority of them do come from those locations. One other question, and I'll bring it to Chief. Good to see you. We're not Strive Together. The Obama Foundation with MBK is connected to us, but yes, so we're separate. We're ground up. We're now in 7 cities, but we're not necessarily affiliated with any national group at this time. Yep. Thank you for the question. So I'm going to bring up Chief Shmaderer, and he can talk you through what has been the impact directly on reducing gun violence and what does that look like, and then we'll come back and get deeper into some of the Q&A that you may have. So can we please welcome Chief Todd Shmaderer.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Let me just give a quick bio about myself, and then I want to kind of get into some of our vital signs for the city of Omaha. You'll see where we started a long time ago, 15 years ago, where we end up today. Been with City of Omaha Police Department for 29 years. Been chief for the last 12 years. That makes me the longest serving consecutive major city police chief in this country, which is hard to believe, and I could tell by the looks on everybody, this guy looks so young. But the reality of it is, I'm not that young, and the reality is didn't have one gray hair 12 years ago. Now I got plenty. So how do I last so long in a job where everybody stays a year or 2 years, 3 years? I was a deputy chief in 2009 to 2012, and I was going to the meetings that Willie talked about. I was just kind of sitting there and I was observing, and I was watching this organization pull everybody together and address root causes of crime, address the vital signs that we need to do, like graduation rates, poverty, you name it. I was watching all of this done. The chief before me left kind of suddenly. I was tapped after a national search to be chief, and one of the first things I did was, look, I've been watching the Empowerment Network. I've been watching 360 for years of this group that wants to work with us, wants to reduce crime, addressing root causes, and they want to work with the Omaha Police Department. Look, I'm all in. This is the way we're going to try to do this, and we're going to go from there. As you can see, by Omaha standards, everything is relative. In 2007, 2008, 246, 243 shootings a year is way too much for the city of Omaha, in our opinion. It really got our attention. That's when we really started this. As you can see, in 2017, 18, and 19, those were 40, 50-year lows for the city of Omaha. We did have a small spike up during COVID. I think you see that all across the country in every major city. You see that small spike up there. My analysis, that was pretty anticipatory. You could see that coming. Here we had all our partners working towards reducing gun violence in our community, and now they have to pause. Now they have to pause to address the people in need of the COVID virus. And so you can see once communities pulled away, once this was pulled away, we spiked right back up. True to form, though, as soon as COVID got over and the only game in town was no longer the Omaha Police Department, we started lowering the numbers again. As we sit here right now in 2024, we're probably looking at our lowest non-fatal shootings that we've ever had on record. This is our homicides. It just shows just a little bit different angle. What is a shooting? A shooting is really a homicide that missed by an inch or two. And so one of the things that we like to do is really keep a close eye on the shootings because you got this strong representative sample as to how well your progress is. And generally, and I say general because you can have a mass shooting where a lot of people are killed. In general, as your shootings go down, your homicides will go down. And as you can see, 18 and 19 were our lowest homicide years that we really had on record. Except for this year, we've only had 16 homicides. We're probably break all our records this year. Spiked up a little in 2020, then we started regathering ourselves again. This is our clearance rate. You can see 2008 and 2009. Look at that clearance rate. This is 2008, 2009. Nothing was working in Omaha. Shootings were high. We couldn't solve any crimes. Look at that clearance rate since then. The last 10 years, it's been 84%, 100% last year. I think we're at 85 or 90 this year. Incidentally, on clearance rates, if you want a quick synopsis of any city you go to, you want to just take a quick look and say, what is this major city's police community relations like? Do they work with the police department? Does the police department, are they receptive to that? Certainly goes both ways. Take a look at the clearance rate, homicide clearance rate. If you're seeing the average of 50% for cities the size of Omaha, if you're seeing lower than that, probably a pretty good indicator that police community relations isn't where it needs to be. I think it's the singular greatest statistic to show how the community and the police are working together. There's no way to solve these crimes unless you have a community willing to work with you. It's just gun assaults and victims, just a little different way of looking at some of the data. It shows the spike with COVID again. Here's the same thing. Out of curiosity, what does our city here have for homicides a year? Do we know? And what is Raleigh, about 400,000, 300? I don't even know. I should have looked. Oh, okay, so you're good size. Well, about 1 million in the metro area here? Okay. Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So it really remarkably similar to Omaha and our area, just by population base. These are just different ways of looking at our statistics here. Take a look at these numbers. These are all the major cities in the Midwest. Omaha sitting the lowest. And then per capita. Look where Omaha's sitting. 10 years ago, Omaha was right here. We used to be about halfway to 3/4 up as the most violent cities per capita compared to this chart. Now we're by far the lowest. And it's been a product, in my opinion, my longevity, the fact that we've reduced crime over the last 12 years. I really strongly consider and credit the Empowerment Network and this 360 model for doing that. And I'll just close with this. I wrote a book, so I threw that in there too. I just want to close. I went through some statistics here. And what is a statistic? It's just a talking point for us. It's really a life. And so when we talk about reducing our homicides from 45 average to 25, that's 20 people a year. You times that by 10 years, that's 200 people whose lives were saved. Countless trauma swell that was prevented from all the trauma that goes into somebody's homicide. All that was prevented 200 times in average. One could really extrapolate how good of a feel this program has been to Omaha just by looking at that aspect. So we are very happy to take your questions. Hit us with anything. We're very open with our mistakes, things we learned from, things we got better with, things that we wish we would have done differently, but now know better.
Thanks, Chief. Questions or comments that you have? In the back? Yes. Yes, so it's very early on. So we had our head down just doing the work for all these years, and we would have people come visit periodically. And about 2 years ago, after we were featured together on CNN, more cities started to get interested. Department of Justice came in, BJA, and so they spent some time with us. And in 2023, I believe, about 30 cities came together and came to Omaha, and we started to share a little bit more. Instead of trying to take on all 20, 30 cities at the same time, we said, look, let's find 5 to 7 that we can start this process with. And Kansas City was one of those cities that had already reached out to us. So we're about 2 years in. They were really having some really escalated levels of homicides, hit an all-time high of 182 at the end of 23. So I was sharing with the group this morning that we sat down with them and started to walk through the process. So they have now formed a KC 360 that's meeting every week. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But the bigger piece is there were 6 different plans at that time. There was a mayor's plan, there was a health department plan, there was a community-based plan. There's a number of different plans and strategies that were out there to address gun violence. We worked with them over about a 6-month period and took all of those plans and converted it into one. Gentleman that's here in the room with us, Raheem, does our research, data, and evaluation. He helped us then take that and convert it into an actual action plan, working with Kansas City. So it's theirs, 250 plus agencies that we brought together to develop that plan. And they're now seeing some reductions already. It's early. It's never a straight line, but they are seeing reductions. And just as importantly, they've been able to now, through Mayor Pro Tem and the mayor's office, budget $30 million over the next 5 years specifically to go to grassroots small agencies to help do the work. These are people that have been doing work for years, but now that there is a master plan, others are coming to the table to invest in that strategy. We're very early in New Orleans. We're very early in Tulsa, working in Lansing, and there's a few other cities that haven't been announced yet. So we're early in the game.
You have something like the Empowerment Network there in Kansas City, that's the fiscal agent?
Yes. Yeah. So we weren't exactly sure, and we didn't want to prescribe how other cities would do it. We know that what worked for us, but it really bubbled up. It was grassroots. We would develop and evolve over time. Somebody said in the other room, it's constantly evolving. We were in a forum this weekend, constantly evolving. So it starts with, is there a partner agency? It's a community-based strategy. It is not run by the government. It's not run by an agency. It is a community-based strategy. Some have started, well, let's just launch 360. So we started with that. All the cities now have come back to, we need a convener, a third-party neutral convener like what we have, what the Empowerment Network does. So we're in the process right now of helping them launch that third-party entity that will then help lead the 360 work. But thank you for the question. In the back, yes, sir. Yes. Yes. Sure. It might take all day to talk all those hits and errors and things that we learned along the way. The first thing is that we decided no matter what happens, you have to keep coming to the table. Because one of the things you may have seen on that homicide trend, in 2015, in the middle of all of this, we had a spike, 50 homicides versus the 40 and 30s that we were having. And so there were some in the community like, well, see, we told you it wasn't working. There's all those meetings every week and all that stuff. But we decided, if you look under it, the non-fatal shootings were still coming down. It just happened to be a really bad year, double homicide, a triple or quadruple. So that's what drew the homicide number, but we stayed with it. So, but we were under consistent that whole year of 2015. All the questions from the community, it's not working, why are you having all these meetings, why are you partnering with the police department? But we just locked in, and we grew at that time from 60 or 70 per week attending to 80 or 90 a week attending. So rather than people running from the table, we came stronger and said, we're committed to this, we're going to keep working at it. The next 4 years were 4 years of the lowest levels of gun violence in the history of the city. Early on, there were people that said, why are the police in the room? You know, we don't trust them, we don't believe in them. You know, why did you even invite them? And we had a few people that, you know, got up and left. They said, we don't want to partner with the police. We don't even want to be in the same room as the police. And then I'm sure there were people inside the police department like, what are you talking about? Community-based group. We're going to have to go to a meeting every week and talk about these issues. And so we decided at that point, we have to make a concentrated, intentional effort to figure out how we work with police department, because they want to go home just like we do. And so there were some that walked away from the table, but there were enough of us that stayed at the table, and we stayed committed to it. And even some of those that were most critical of us making that decision, many of them now have come back to the table and are working very closely with us. We went through all kinds of struggles. I could spend all day trying to launch the job program. That was one of the most difficult things that we could do, is to create a job program specifically for the kids, the young people in our community that were always left out of the job opportunities. And you would think, people always say, well, you know, put your bootstraps on, bootstrap it up, go to work. Well, these kids wanted to go to work. They couldn't go to work. There weren't enough job opportunities. There was all the stuff, all the barriers that were in place for them. So you would think that raising money to create a job program would have been easier than it was, but that was extremely difficult. And so there's other things that we can talk about, but I think that police-community relations, staying with the strategy, because a lot of cities move the strategy. As soon as a bad year happens, the strategy changes. A new thing is launched. We stayed with it. Let's stay with it. Let's stay with it. Let's stay with it. And when we did, that had that kind of positive result to it. Chief?
I'd say the biggest lesson learned that we have within the Omaha Police Department, I still see it in some major cities. Can we go back to let's go back to the shooting slide, just so I can get some dates. During the time period from 2007 to 2012, when we had violence creep up in the city, just like every major city will have, we would deploy resources to that area. We would oversaturate that area. We would use the officers in uniform, and we'd go hit that area. Sounds like a reasonable response to addressing crime. Here's where the crime is. Let's put some officers there. But the officers that you see driving around in police cars, in police cruisers, they're humping calls, 13, 14, 15 calls a day. They don't know, because of the nature of their work, they're busy doing other things. They don't know where the violent offenders are. They don't know that a very small percentage are responsible for a good portion of all this crime. And so what we would hit the area, we would have no crime for the night we were heavily in there, maybe 2 nights. But then it didn't resolve anything, didn't hit any symptoms, didn't hit any cures. And the complaints on Omaha police went up, because half the time you're in there now just stopping people that live there, trying to get back to their home. So we were stopping everybody but who we needed to, causing a lot of damage. So what we did is we took that particular strategy off the table and put specialists in place, street-level specialists that were designed to know what is going on the street, identify the pockets of violence. Maybe this gang is having a problem with this gang. You name it. They understand the terrain of the city so well at this point that instantly when there's a victim of a shooting, I'm instantly getting the report back. Okay, this is the victimology on this person. Social media says that they were fighting with these people. We can get in charge of it right now. And so taking the officers away and getting rid of that heavy enforcement, heavy presence, zero tolerance approach, and making them specialists so they understood where the violence was coming from, understood the small percentage that were causing the violent crime, and then in essence, the whole goal is to leave everybody else alone. Address violent offenders and leave everybody else alone. And so our approach changed to a more precision approach because of that, and it's been a game changer for the city of Omaha. It really has. And I know when violence hits real hard, you got to have a heavy presence there. And that's fine, but it's not a cure. The only cure is if you know what's actually going on the ground level. And the only way to do that is your street level units designed just for that purpose. That's all they do, strictly. So I'd say that was our biggest mistake, and it was a huge one. Yes. They are police officers, and they could be called anything you want to call them. Sometimes they're called a gang unit. Sometimes they're called street intervention units, street level violence units. It can be whatever you want. The point is, each one of those detectives in that unit have a responsibility. And we assigned each one a gang, and we basically said, you know everything that you need to know about this gang. Here's your resources with intel. You use everything you have. Because when somebody is hurt and a member of this gang, we're going to come to you with our homicide unit. We're going to say, what do you know? It's also grown into an amazing prevention and intervention system where we kind of know where our future victims are, and we can kind of get with them beforehand, see if we can get them on the right path. I look at it this way. Let's say you have a gang of 50 people. If you think all 50 people in that gang are out shooting the guns, they are not. You might have one or two willing to do that. But then everybody else is a potential victim because of that label. And so what we've done on our side in Omaha is understand that so well, where I can't think of a time in the city, unless we had a few serial killers over the years, I can't think of a time in the city where we've had a homicide where we didn't know a motive that very same day. And that's just that street level work. Yes, sir. Okay, so the blue would be victims. So sometimes there was more than one victim in a shooting. And then the yellow is the number of shootings itself. Yeah, so singular versus just the number of victims.
Kind of to that point, one of the things when we're talking about building relationship between community and police, especially our community, is accountability. And back in that 2012 time period, we were doing some really good work, but there was something significant that happened. There was an officer incident. We say 33rd and Seward in Omaha. It has a whole different meaning to it because there were some officers that were in a situation with a family, and it was on camera and everything else. So it was bad. It was, and I think Chief had either just become chief or. And he had to go through a situation, and everybody wants to hear this, but he had to evaluate it, do an independent review, and he ended up firing 8 officers because of that one incident. In the community, it was a wake-up call because here we are talking about working with police and doing the things, but that was the first time probably in the history of the city where the activists, the people on the street, could look to the chief and say, okay, he's serious. He's about this business. And that's not the only thing, but over time, he has consistently shown yes, we're going to hold our community accountable, but we're also going to make sure that the police department is accountable. And that then some of the other activists that had been really against what we were doing, it got everybody's attention. And it doesn't have to be something that's quite at that level, but just like we want residents to be accountable, the police have to be accountable, and it's that shared accountability that has helped us build. The other thing is we've gone through high-level officer-involved shootings in our community just in the last 60 days. And so we've been having forums and community groups, and he's had to make some really tough calls about some stuff. And we as a community have had to come together, but he didn't run from it. He didn't hide from it. He came to 360, 150 people in the room, took the questions 4 weeks in a row, And so collectively, we're addressing this and moving it forward. So it's definitely not a perfect, it's not easy, it's ongoing, it's every day. But those types of responsive communication and accountability is what's helped us build trust and relationships. We didn't talk about this, but let me fast forward real quick. Omaha 360. So when people hear Omaha 360, they typically think of this. This is what is all over the media. Is this once a week meeting from 2 to 3 where anywhere from 80 to 100. So that meeting of 7 people has turned into a weekly meeting where 80 to 100 people come together. For 1 hour, it's facilitated by us as an empowerment network, but it has law enforcement, educators, neighbors. It's an open meeting, and it's all focused on reducing gun violence. Looking at the prior 7 days, what major incidents have occurred, who's responding to it. Is it the Cure Violence group that's going out U-turn? Is it Chrome and Leo that does direct intervention? Who is it that's going to be addressing that prior week? Now, this next 7 days, we've got this football game coming up. We have a parade coming up doing this. Who's going to be at the parade? Okay, the pastors group's going to be there. U-turn is going to be there. The other intervention groups are going to be there. The law enforcement groups. So it's 7 days back, 7 days forward, but it's every single week, 2 to 3 on Wednesday afternoon. You can count on this meeting happening. That's a component of Omaha 360. Yes, ma'am. Yes. 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 Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So we have to have those open conversations. And I know there's different settings. We were talking about this earlier. Different cities have different, from a political standpoint. There's some cities where the interventionists are part of the health department or within the city. In our particular setup, we do a lot of prevention-related work. We do a lot of intervention. So we follow, there's a cure violence model. So gang intervention is done by a community-based agency. The chief also has some people on his team that do intervention-related work. Of course, enforcement and collaborative policing, and then reentry. So those are the core components of 360. But we have consistent tables. The big table is that Wednesday at 2 o'clock. But we have a smaller intervention group that is more specifically those that are doing more intervention on the street and how we directly address some of the gaps that you're talking about. So we know coming out of that room that there are 20 people that are really driving this current wave of violence. And we know 2, the police department is going to work on those 2. These 5, we believe U-turn and this group can get to them. This group, the pastor knows this one because they're off of this street. So we come out of the room on the intervention targeted meeting where we have a very, very specific list of who is going to work with who and that communication. That's great. Absolutely. It has to be on both sides. And we won't always agree. There'll be plenty of times where we disagree. But at the end of the day, the common vision of reducing violence, creating a safe community, that is the common vision. Chief may have touched on it, but we have vital signs that we have a community identified that we report back on to the community on a consistent basis. So data is a huge portion of it. Yes, ma'am. Yes. 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 And everything you just described, we have it too. We've got our city, city with the police department, and we have a county and county commissioners. So it's separate, even though the city makes up 80%, 90% of the county. So we have all those dynamics. I was sharing with the group earlier, we really focused first on the community itself. Who's most impacted? What's happening in that community? Let's bring those leaders together, even leaders that have not shown that they are willing to work. Are you willing to come to the table? And some of it was one-on-one convening, some of it small group, till we got to that point where we had 70 that agreed to come together and figure out how to work together. And then once we had that capacity, then we started to interface more with city, county, state, Congress, once we had that kind of capacity within the community. And 300 plus people come into community forums. So we had to build internal capacity first. That led us down the path of now. And a matter of fact, out of that group came a city councilman, came 2 state senators, 3 school board members that were affiliated and understood the dynamic because they had heard it directly from the community themselves. And so that's how we started to begin that capacity building. Go ahead. Yes. Yes.
I'd like to hear from the chief. What are some of the reasons with your, like, in terms of law enforcement?
Yes.
What would prevent them from?
Well, going back to your first question, as far as the political environment, 2 things that I've seen in Omaha that I think have contributed to our success. I was appointed chief by a Democrat mayor. 6 months later, a Republican mayor took over. She's been there the last, I don't know, 10 years or so. And I don't think anybody knows what I am. I'm a registered independent, and nobody knows. And that's been the secret to, I think, the police department's success, is neither mayor tried to run the police department. If only that was the case in every city. It's not. And because mayors and politicians will come and go, every time they come and go, the police department can't change their approach. You're just starting over every time. So the staying power of the police department being allowed, I was allowed to run the police department for 12 years. Willie's been around for 18 years. We had a council member around for 12. Staying power, everybody has really saw this and said, we're going to stick with it. And the reason they stick with it is the data keeps getting better. If the data wasn't looking the way it did, we'd have to segue and go off to something else. And so that's how I answered that first part. And then your second question was?
In terms of, like, police with law enforcement having some uneasiness coming to
Yeah. Yeah, it was. So I had to force it at first. I had to say, we're going to be there. I had to make it a priority from the top, which meant my attendance early on, which meant my high-ranking officials early on, which meant I was going to assign the best and my brightest to command positions in that area that we needed to address. And so it was really just prioritization, and it started with force. Willie mentioned the 33rd and Seward. Yes, the community loved me, but could you imagine what the police department thought of me when I fired 8 people? They're looking at me like, who is this crazy guy? Hasn't even been here 6 months as chief. Now, when somebody gets terminated, everybody's looking at that officer saying, well, you got what you deserved. And so the culture piece just changed from day one until now. And I say that culture piece because there's some defining moments in every major city where you start to see that culture change to the better. And then all of a sudden the statistics start to follow it. And you'll kind of know when that is. You'll know when that police department and the community are truly in a relationship and not faking it, not doing it halfway. You'll be able to tell that moment in time. And then that's when your momentum starts to get really good.
Let me close with a couple things real quick. And so, as I mentioned, the 360 portion of it is the weekly meeting, engagement, positive activity, but they're very targeted, very focused. And there's a strategy that we work on that takes prevention, intervention, enforcement, reentry, very specific. And I want to emphasize, this is not just the empowerment network. It's literally 500 plus agencies, organizations, neighborhoods, and churches that are aligned to an overall strategy. And it's consistent. So there are a lot of folks that are doing the work. So I really want to recognize that the folks on the ground that are doing this work 24/7. We do have hospital-based intervention. We do have gang intervention, some of them single-person operations, cure violence. We embrace all of it. It's not one thing. We embrace all of it. And I want to close with this because some people say it's just direct intervention that you've got to focus on. Yes, we definitely have a focused intervention strategy, but we also have a root cause strategy. And what I mean by that is, as we were doing the other work around reducing unemployment, increasing graduation rates, and reducing violence, we also looked at the built environment and looked at the assets that we had and worked on a community-based strategy of how do we redevelop this community that's been neglected for 50 years. Over this time period, these are now close to $1 billion of reinvestment in a neighborhood that had been neglected since the 1950s. And so we're seeing things happen at that level. And the reason I wanted to show you that is we took that plan and we convened a group of stakeholders from Bankers Association, police chief, police union, community-based groups, youth development agencies, and we took our proposal to the state of Nebraska, and they approved $500 million to come in to support the strategy that we've been implementing around job creation, housing revitalization, entrepreneurship, and improving the community that had been, again, disinvested for decades. But the chief of police and the head of the police union went with us to testify in support of this root cause investment. That's the level of relationship building, trust building, and now economic resources that are coming into the community because of this relationship that has developed over time. So I'm not sure time-wise how we're doing, or we have time for a few more questions, or how are we doing? Okay. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yeah. So the Empowerment Network, again, is a 501c3, and we have 7 different tables that we facilitate, from education to health to housing to violence prevention. And so each of those tables has a different funding source. So we have city funds that helps our youth employment program between community development block grant funds and the general fund from the mayor's office. We match that then with private philanthropic dollars. The violence prevention work in the past has been supported by the Office of Violence Prevention, some state funds, and then some private funds. The housing, it's a different mixture. So every one of those different strategies has been developed. There's a different funding stream that has been aligned to it. So city, county, state, and we just received our first DOJ grant or notification of it just recently. But a lot of it has been localized, city, county, state, philanthropic dollars. Thank you. So the question is, how often do the tables meet? The Violence Prevention Group 360 meets every single week. Most of the others meet on a monthly basis. And also, for those that are wondering, okay, you meet Wednesday at 2 o'clock, how does the community get there? We also host community meetings on Saturdays and then also in the evenings to make sure community can engage with the strategy. So thank you for that question. Thank you all so much for attending the session. We'll be around if you have questions, but thank you so much. God bless.